Howdy, Vine Trippers. I wanted to take just a moment before the show begins to tell you a little bit about the Texas Wine Lover website and app. It is a definite must-have for anyone wanting to explore the Texas wine industry. Now, they have a website. It's txwinelover.com, but they also have an app that you can actually download to your phone. You can find it on the Apple App Store or on the Google Play Store for Android devices. And it's going to be kind of your one-stop shop for when you go out to visit these great places. So you get to listen to them here on the podcast or watch them on YouTube to learn about these wineries. But when you go to visit, make sure you're checking out that app, because I'm sure you're probably going to want to visit other places in the area as well. And you can do incredible searches. It's the most comprehensive listing of winery information in Texas. And you can look for wineries in your area to go visit multiple places. You can sort those listings by finding out ones that are kid-friendly, maybe some that are pet-friendly. If you want to look for events or things that are going on, if you want to find those that can host RVs, just about any category you can think of, you can actually sort those listings and find wineries around you to go visit. The app is free to use for you and I. So it's a perfect, again, hand-in-hand tool when you're going out to visit wineries. Listen to them on this podcast, watch them on YouTube, and then start making your plans to go visit and use the Texas Wine Lover app when you go. Now, it can also be a great tool. Maybe you're not even looking for a winery. You just happen to be traveling to some place in Texas, and you just might think, I've got a little extra time. I wonder if there are any wineries in the area. You can actually look them up in the Texas Wine Lover app. You can search either by the name of a winery, or it's got a map view. So you can actually pull up a map of the area around you and see locations of wineries near you and go visit them and support the Texas wine industry. So you got to use the Texas Wine Lover app. It goes perfectly with this podcast. So make sure you check it out before you go on your next trip among the vines. Again, it's www.txwinelover.com, or look up the Texas Wine Lover app on your favorite phone app store and make sure you get that downloaded and use it frequently. You will benefit from it, and ask for Texas wines. Let's see the Texas wine industry prosper and go visit some of these fun places that I'm bringing to you on the show. Welcome to Texas Under Vine, an exploratory podcast to scout out the best Texas wine country has to offer. I'm your wine guide, Scott, and I'm here to lead you on an auditory expedition to the vineyards and wineries across the great Lone Star State. Each episode will cover a different vineyard, winery, or wine-related business operating in Texas. You'll hear interviews, descriptions, and details about each location that will excite you to visit and experience them for yourself. Ready to plan a wine tour? Use these episodes to choose the most interesting spots for you and your friends to check out. Most of all, enjoy hearing about the rapidly growing wine industry in the state and what makes our wines and wineries the best. Howdy, fellow Vine Trippers, and welcome to episode 54 of the Texas Under Vine podcast. For this episode, I was actually able to travel to Fredericksburg, Texas, and I was lucky enough to be able to visit one of what is probably one of the most keystone wineries of the Texas Hill Country and the Texas wine industry, Becker Vineyards. So I was able to travel to this winery and had the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Becker, the founder and namesake of the winery itself, and kind of pick his brain a little bit about his story, how he got it started, the wines that they're serving, and what it might look like if you go to visit. And it's really incredible, the job that this particular winery has done over the last 30 years. The story actually goes back 30 years, but even a little bit before that. The location actually was founded by Dr. Richard Becker and his wife at the time, Bunny. They wanted a kind of quiet retreat to go to get away from the hustle and bustle. Dr. Becker was a medical doctor, actually, in endocrinology, and he had grown up in Texas. He was a native Texan, but he grew up in Abilene. His family goes even further back in Texas, as he'll share about in the interview. But he grew up in Abilene, Texas, went to the University of Texas, as well as several other prestigious universities studying medicine, and had returned to Texas in the San Antonio area to practice medicine. And so he and Bunny wanted a place, kind of a quiet retreat to go to spend some time. And they found this place out there outside of Fredericksburg that they were able to purchase. And Dr. Becker had always had a strong interest in growing things. So he had visited there was only 2 wineries out there at the time. And he'd gone and visited their wineries and tasted their wines. He wanted to plant some vines of his own, and he planted a vineyard, and they ended up having their first batch of wine. They decided to make some of their own and created their first batch of wine in 1995. So that's when they really started the operations of Becker Vineyards, even though they had been growing before that and had owned the property a little bit before that. They opened up a little tin building for a tasting room and got their start right around, I think he said 1995 was their first vintage. So this 2025 is going to be their 30th anniversary. His wife, Bunny, was actually kind of a fan of French culinary arts and French cooking, and both of them shared this passion for pairing food and wine together. And that was one of their goals when they started making wine, was how can we make a full culinary experience with both food and wine together? And that's kind of what started their dream here. He planted several of the more well-known wine varieties at the time, but has since changed some things a little bit and planted some other things. One of the things that Dr. Becker and Becker Vineyards is widely known for is basically for founding in Texas the planting of Viognier. Now, Viognier was a grape that was fading from existence. Dr. Becker said that around the time it had gotten down to maybe 50 or 60 acres left in the world. And this was in the northern Rhone Valley in a little area called Condrieu. And Dr. Becker had actually been able to visit there. He noticed some similarities of that region to the hill country, fell in love with Viognier as a varietal, felt like it might do well in our climate here, so he came back and planted it, and is widely credited as the first plantings of Viognier in Texas. And over the years, that particular wine varietal can easily be said to be the signature white wine of Texas. It's planted in great variety now. All over the world, it's actually been picking up more plantings where it almost got down to non-existence. Now is being spread throughout the world, and Texas is the heart of a lot of that. Many wineries throughout Texas now planting and making Viognier, and it is definitely a cornerstone of the wine here in Texas. And that's all thanks to Dr. Becker's incredible vision and incredible palate for tasting this amazing wine, and how well it goes great with a lot of different foods as well. Now, their winemaking team there at Becker Vineyards is headed up by John Leahy, and they have an incredible team making those great wines there at Becker Vineyards. It's seen by many awards. They've won a lot of awards throughout multiple wine competitions, including getting the top Texas wine, earning the saddle there at the Houston Rodeo for several of their wines over the course of their time there at Becker Vineyards. Now, in addition to wine, Dr. Becker also, again, loves growing things. So he partners with Wild Seed Farms, and they plant some of their fields to several beautiful varieties. They plant poppies, they plant zinnias, they plant lavender. So if you go out in the spring to Becker Vineyards, you're not only going to see this beautiful winery, but the fields just covered in gorgeous flowers there as well. It's truly a sight to see there in the Texas Hill Country. And While Dr. Becker has been building this amazing winery, it was the third one in Central Texas in the Texas Hill Country for the last 30 years. He's also been working full time through his medical practice. He retired just a year ago after 52 years of medical practice. So the testament of this amazing winery and everything is done, he gives, and I agree, to the amazing team that he gathered around him. He says in the interview that he was only able to visit sometimes one day a week out of what's going on. So a lot of the amazing things that Becker Vineyards has done, becoming this keystone winery in the Hill Country, is a testament to that amazing team that he has compiled to work there at the winery. And they are operating like a well-oiled machine, just putting out amazing and better wines year after year after year. Also, in addition to that tasting room they have there at the main vineyard, they also have a secondary tasting room in a really cool old Buick building there on Main Street in downtown Fredericksburg. So it's a great little respite if you're out shopping and you're walking along that Main Street drag going from place to place, to stop in and hop on into that little tasting room and get a great glass of wine, enjoy your time there while you're shopping. And because Fredericksburg is an open container area, you can actually take your wine and shop with it. But it's a great little tasting room there on the main street as well. If you don't get all the way out to the vineyard, but you're just in downtown Fredericksburg, you got to make sure and go to that tasting room too. And when I went to visit, I actually was invited to join in on one of their famous monthly Chef's Table events, where we met in the Lavender Room, which you'll hear Dr. Becker talk about in the interview. And it's this great little banquet facility kind of event area that they have. And we had this really long table. And I got to sit down with Dr. Becker, and as they brought out these amazing chef created dishes, several rounds with wines paired to each one. It was really a tasty as well as fun experience. And to hear Dr. Becker share about all of these different wines, to hear the stories behind them. He would get up and talk between each course about the different wines that were coming. And it was really fun to hear all those stories and be surrounded by these great people as we tasted these great wines and enjoyed some great food together. And I was also privileged while I was there to actually sit down and interview Dr. Becker. We went down into their wine cellar, and surrounded by the barrels and the bottles, we got down to the nitty gritty and really talked about the history there of Becker Vineyards and what to expect when you go to visit. So without further ado, let's hear directly from him. Howdy, Vine Trippers. Welcome to our episode on Becker Vineyards. So I am lucky to be here today with Dr. Becker, the proprietor of Becker Vineyards here, and the namesake. His name's on the gate out front. And so he's got a long and storied history here, this winery itself, and the things that he's done here. You'll get to hear more about that here in the interview in a few minutes. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and turn our attention here to Dr. Becker. So, Dr. Becker, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get started in this crazy wine world?
I don't have an easy answer. Let's say part of it is half my family has been in the Hill Country since before the Civil War.
Really?
So my great-great-grandfather was married in Brady in 1859. They were all Scots. They were all red-headed, green-eyed Scots named Crouch.
Okay.
And I'm sure I'm remotely related to Hondo, and but I don't know for sure. I've never tracked it down, but I know they were all Crouches. And my great-great-grandfather then was in John Bell Hood's army in the Civil War, died in probably Gettysburg in '63. And but my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my mother were all born in Brady, and I grew up in Abilene. So,
Abilene. Okay.
yes, and so I went to high school there. I graduated from the University of Texas with a BA and MA in English literature, and then I went to medical school in San Antonio. And then I trained in Boston and in Yale and in Bethesda, Maryland, and came back to teach at the medical school and to do research, and came back to this part of the world. And then with my history, with half my family history in the Hill Country, we thought we'd try to find a little place that, and my wife specified no yard work. So, like just to come like every other weekend or every third weekend, just kind of an escape. And it's before all the prices had become insane at this part of the world. And we were looking around, and we found a little place, this place. Only half of it was for sale. And I was, after some lucky things happening, I was able to buy it. And then the other half was also available. So then we put it together, and with a loan from Frost Bank.
Okay.
You're supposed to go into the wine business with a disposable $2 or $3 or $4 or $10 million. I had none of that, but I had a loan from Frost Bank.
Okay.
So I bought the land, and we began planting grapes. And part of this began because my wife was a very good French cook, and I'd heard there was something called food and wine pairing, and I was trying to learn about that. And I like to grow things, and always have. So then there were only two wineries around us anywhere near. One was Bell Mountain, Bob Oberhelman, and the other was Grape Creek, which was started by Ned Sims, an oil man from Louisiana.
Yeah.
A very direct speaker. And they both became friends. And then one of my sons, either Will or Joe, would come up on the weekend. We'd go over and taste a bottle of wine with them on a Saturday morning and sit with one or the other of those gentlemen for 3 or 4 hours and hear about how you make a vineyard and a winery work, which nobody really knew what to do. And then we began planting a few grapes. And I think what really has happened here is the wine was always better than I thought it would be, or I thought it could be. But I had no palate, and so I'd begun, because of my wife's French cooking, I'd heard this good wine pairing thing. I thought I'd try to learn about that. But this was before, this was in the 80s, so there was really no place to buy wine in San Antonio much. And so I began to experiment and just trying to develop a food and wine pairing, a sense of food and wine pairing. But it's hard to do on your own. You really need a teacher. But that evolved, and you never know if you're going to have much of a palate or not. It's like any other thing. It's kind of just part of your DNA.
Yeah.
And so, but it turns out I have a good memory for wine. So if I taste a glass of wine that I tasted 5 years ago, that light bulb goes on. I can remember it.
Wow.
I claim this has not been tested, but there is something does happen when I taste the wine I've tasted before. So that's useful. And so we began planting grapes. We planted all 5 of the Bordeaux red varieties, and then some Chardonnay. And then we began to plant Viognier because I had tasted some Viognier from Condrieu in the northern Rhone Valley, Chateau Gruet, and I really liked it. And then we made a trip there, and I met Madame Gruet, and we were impressed how much that part of the Rhone looks like the hill country in terms of fruit trees and just the general appearance. And so, and our Viognier has always been kind of a star. So that's how that began.
Yeah. And were you just planting the grapes just as a fun little project?
No, when I looked at it, this is too costly to be an experiment.
Yeah.
So I thought if we were going to do it, we should plant enough so that if they produced and the other 2 vineyards around us were working, both Bell Mountain and Grape Creek, that we would be able to sell the wine. I don't think you could ever make any money in the wine business or repay the debts that I had for the land and for the little tin building we built for a winery. And so we planted about 5 acres.
Okay.
And then 10 acres. And that's a lot of work.
That is a lot of work.
If you look at a vineyard. So, but the grapes did well, and we planted Chardonnay, which I thought probably wouldn't work, and our Chardonnay won a gold medal in the Dallas Morning News wine competition, and so it was starting to work. And I was following sort of basic French winemaking principles from what I could read in books. I'm a reader.
Okay.
And so we did all the fermentation in French barrels and our American oak barrels, and for both red and white, and tried to manipulate the wine as little as possible.
Right.
and then bottled it with a machine that we bottled one. We could do one bottle at a time.
A hand bottler.
A hand bottler, and that's right. That's everything I bought was secondhand, used. My children called it Chateau Shoestring, and but that's how we began.
You really bootstrapped it from
That's
the
what
ground up.
no doubt about it. And I'm working full time as a doctor, and so we could come out here on the weekends.
Yeah.
We had one wonderful employee, Jim Brown, who was with us for at least 10 years, and is a good friend. His daughter got married out here after he left, and but he was fabulous. And then we had maybe one assistant with him. And then Nicole knocked on the door 25 or 30 years ago, and that was a lucky knock for us. She's still here. So it's just been slow, and after the initial loans that I got to start this, I paid all my loans off after about 6 years.
Okay.
So everything we've done since here has been on a cash basis.
Oh.
So any enlargement reflected that the market was pulling.
Okay.
And so one of the things that's surprising about the wine business is you cannot push. People will say, "Oh, really?" Somebody has to say, "I've got to have some of your wine. I've heard about it. I've read about it. I've tasted it." And so that was the way we've developed this.
Okay. And around what time was that? What year was that you planted?
So we bought the property in 89 and 90.
Okay.
We did several years of research, and then we started planting in 92. First harvest was 95, first vintage. And this is 2025 coming, and that's our 30th anniversary year. So it's been fun to watch it develop, but it's very much a team effort. We have a lot of very talented people here. We have one of the best winemakers in the United States, just by chance. John Leahy is here.
Yeah.
And that explains why we win all the medals in all the competitions. You've seen all the saddles we've won, all the double gold medals we've won in San Francisco. So, but it's when I say we, that's John Leahy.
Okay.
We have a wonderful team that he oversees, but he's a brilliant winemaker.
And then when did you open? So 95 was your first vintage. When did you open the doors to the tasting room?
So we had to have a little tin building and it had to be bonded. There are lots of laws about how to operate as a winery. So I got that constructed, and then we had a little tasting room. We opened in the spring of '96.
Okay.
And it's slowly grown from there.
Okay. Yeah, and so tell me about some of the facilities that you have on site here now. It looks like more than a little tin tasting room.
What do we have? Well, we've slowly developed the property. The only thing that was here when we began was a little cabin that was built by a man whose way was paid over from Germany by the dry goods store in Fredericksburg. And he was able to save 75 cents a week and buy this property. And he built a log structure.
Yeah.
And that log structure was the only thing here.
Okay.
When we started. And so we have fixed that so you can spend the night in it. It now has a floor. It has chinking between the logs. It has air conditioning, heating, running water, showers. So it all works. And it's been kind of restored with Texas primitive antiques. And then we built another structure called the Lavender House, which has a commercial kitchen. And it's a copy of about an 1860 building that's over near Johnson City.
Okay.
And it's a stone building with wood lean-to ends.
Uh-huh.
And so we're able to have lunches and dinners there for 110 people, and we could cook for them. And it has a nice patio on the back. And then we've expanded the winery to go from the 1,500 cases we made the first year, which was 95, we make about 70,000 cases a year now.
Wow.
So that means more storage, more places where barrels could be. And we have 5,000 barrels of wine in our winery. And our winery is 100% Texas fruit.
Okay.
At this point. We had a problem in 1993 in which it snowed in May.
Yeah. Wow. In May.
So there was no grape production. So we had to buy grapes from California. We brought them here, made the wine here. And if you put it in the bottle, we did not put Texas on the label. But now we're 100% Texas again. But it's not easy to grow grapes and make wine in Texas.
Yeah. It's got its own challenges for
It's
sure.
got its own challenges. And I will tell you that there are three parts of this business. There's viticulture,
Yes.
there's winemaking, and there's wine sales.
Yes.
And they are equally difficult.
They all have their own challenges.
Equally difficult.
Yeah.
To be excellent.
Okay.
Yeah. It's easy to be mediocre.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to make the best wine that you can make and sell it, it's hard.
Well, and I think the success of Becker over the 30 years now has shown that you've done a good realm in all three of those areas.
I think that's true.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about Viognier. So you mentioned it a moment ago, planting Viognier. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were the first, what I've heard, to bring Viognier to Texas?
First to plant it, first to produce it, first to sell it, for sure. And it's, I was trying to learn about wine, like you were saying you have, and Robert Mondavi, who kind of adopted us for unclear reasons, said, you have to grow the grapes and make the wine. You can learn a lot from a book, but not enough. And so to know how that grape is going to perform and what kind of wine you're going to make from that grape, you have to grow it and harvest it and take care of it. So in exploring wines, Viognier was, so this was like in the late 80s. We had tasted some Viognier. There wasn't much anywhere in the world. At one point, it was down to maybe 50 or 60 acres, planted mainly in the top of the Rhone. Then a little bit began to be planted in California, a little bit in South America, and but not much. So I began tasting the Chateau Gruet from Condrieu, but we loved it, and so I thought this might be a wine to try.
Okay.
And I thought that maybe a way to start would be, instead of making Cabernet Sauvignon, and because there are great Cabernets made in the United States and all over the world, maybe if we had a grape that we could make as a wonderful wine, and people said, then they might begin to find a place for it.
The signature.
So that's what I was thinking. So that's what we did.
Okay.
That was the thought.
What attracted you most to the flavors in Viognier? What do you
Well,
like most about it?
it's very rich, very complex. It's said to be the red wine drinker's white wine. I think there's some truth in that. And it's just you have to. Have you tasted it?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so it's a treat. It's kind of been, I think, it's now become kind of the signature white wine in Texas.
Yeah, it does so well in this climate, as you found from your time in Condrieu. So do you feel like that now Viognier has increased its plantings worldwide? Is it growing worldwide?
Yeah, it is, without a doubt. Certainly in California and other places in the United States, and vineyards around in Virginia, places like that. It's planted a lot. Lots in South America. Yeah.
Well, with your vineyards here, do you still have, you said you started with about 5 acres, went to 10 acres. Is that still about what you have here on site?
No, and we're currently, we've been in a program the last 3 years to increase the planting here. So we've taken some of the older vines out that needed to be replaced, and we're going to be at about 80 acres of vineyard here, and they're doing wonderfully. We have a great viticulturist and a great manager in Dylan Berg, and it's really going well.
Do you still focus on those same varietals, the 5 Bordeaux grapes and Viognier? Or
No,
things as well?
I think we'd asked the question. We've been growing grapes and making wine here for approaching 30 years. They all grow well. Which are the best? Which has made the best wine?
Yeah.
And we think in this soil, and our soil is an unusual soil of sand and decomposed granite. And the granite is Precambrian granite.
Okay.
So this was sludge in an ocean 500 million years ago.
Yeah.
Before there was even microscopic life. It sank into the earth, got transmogrified into granite, and then it's only on the surface a few places. The bottom of the Grand Canyon, the Llano uplift in the hill country, which also pushed all the oil-bearing sands to the side, and a few, maybe in Turkey, but it's rare on the surface. And I think it's responsible for I think the really good Rhone wines that are produced here, both red and white, Sauvignon Blanc, our Chardonnay has been extraordinary from here. So those are the wines that we're focusing on in our replanting. We still have some Bordeaux reds, and the Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon in this soil are fab.
Yeah.
So, and John won back-to-back double gold in San Francisco 2 years in a row with Sauvignon Blanc grown on our property. So I'm expanding that planting because I think it makes, the wine is so good, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying. We're trying to make that kind of selection. Unfortunately, it takes probably 100 years or 200 years. And then there are other, our weather is not as supportive as it is, say, in Napa. Things get ripe here, but we have other pressures.
Yeah.
And we've had a real problem with Pierce's disease, which I think we now control very well. And so it's just, we just need to, as Mr. Mondavi said, you've got to grow the grapes to make the wine. That's what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, so in addition to your 80 acres here, do you source grapes from other locations?
So we have probably about a dozen people who grow grapes for us in Texas. And they are basically on a line to the northwest. So wonderful grower in Mason County, and then around Lubbock, west of Lubbock, slightly southwest of Lubbock. That's where they're growing in Brownfield, Meadow, Plains, and those little towns out near Lubbock.
Okay. And then let's talk about some of the wines for a little bit then. So what have been some of your most successful wines that you've enjoyed?
Well, we've made wonderful Cabernet and grapes grown by the Canada family and Jet Wilmoth and his family west of Lubbock. So I think the soil out there and the climate allows us to make wines that again score double gold in San Francisco against cabs from California and everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think that's our real competition as I see it. And we've made, wonderful Tempranillos, Merlots. Then we've been our Dolcetto was named the best wine made in Texas one year. Our Viognier has been named the best wine made in Texas. Wonderful, others that I mentioned, but all of those, a lot of talented children.
Have you had a couple of favorites that you've kind of seen over the years evolve?
Well, our current 2022 Viognier from Six Hearts Vineyard in Tokyo, Texas.
Okay.
It was named I guess it got a platinum award in the sommelier competition this year. That's one of my favorites, and I'm loving our older wines. So we have a cellar that we have developed, and we're letting our wines age, and we can now have a tasting, for example, of Canada Cab, which we had about a month ago, beginning with 2008 and 9, 10, 12, 14. And it's fun to see those wines as they age, how rich they get.
Do a vertical tasting of those different things.
Yeah. These are wines that won great scores when we entered them when they were young, but they're aging beautifully, which is important to me.
That's really nice. I like that. So let's talk about the location here a little bit. So if people wanted to come and visit, what do you do, events or things like that here? You talked a little bit about that Lavender House.
We have lots of events. We've had for the last 2 years a French chef on staff full time who won a Michelin star in a restaurant in Europe. So we can have food and wine pairing, which the Texas food, which is add the hottest, spiciest thing you can to something. You can say this is Texas. Destroys the wine palate.
Yeah.
So everything tastes like battery acid with it. But with French food, it's a different experience. And so that's good. And so we do that as we're going to have a chef's table today, and we'll have a food and wine pairing with French dishes. And then we're able to, a lot of people come here. There are a lot of companies that have retreats. The medical school faculty's been out here, stuff like that. So that's the way we market that. We don't have a restaurant that's open every day.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that, but I want this to make food that will really pair well with our wine.
All right.
And that, again, goes back to what you said at the beginning, was one of your basic desires was to the food pairing thing.
And we also plant flowers. We have with John Thomas's help from Wild Seed Farms. We started at the same time. He started planting poppies here, and we started planting grapes. And he plants one of our fields in poppies every spring. And then we have, after that, 2 more zinnia plantings, which are glorious when they bloom. Then we have a field of lavender, and we have a lavender festival in the spring. And we have the great chefs of Texas who come here. We have a series of famous Texas chefs. They come and cook and paired with our wine. Lots of things like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to rewind for just a second, going back to A Guide to Thinking. At what point in your career, so you're starting off the winery, you're producing these wines now, you got this tasting room open. At what point did you say, okay, maybe I should leave the medical field and go into full-time winery and wine?
Well, I didn't. I was a physician for 52 years, and I retired a year ago. And so I always did that full time.
So you did both of these things at the same time?
Well, but yes, I did it with a wonderful team of people, an amazing group of people, and they knew that I would not be out here until maybe one day on the weekend.
Okay.
For the most part, all throughout those years, I just couldn't do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And where were you practicing at that time?
Yeah, endocrinology, internal medicine.
Okay. And where?
I was in the San Antonio.
San Antonio area?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, you just come in for the weekends when you could, and
that's right.
Things a little bit.
Yeah.
Having that good team behind you definitely helps to your success.
This is really their winery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got your name on the gate, but it's their winery. Right?
Yes.
I love that. Well, let's say a listener's now getting excited. They're wanting to come out and visit Becker. So what would it look like if a listener came out to visit? What would a typical tasting look like? Do you usually offer a sample of wines that's picked by the server, or do they pick their own wines? Do you have different types of tastings?
Well, we have different types of tastings, and they can go online and schedule a higher tier of tastings in which they might taste a tier of fine wines that we've selected, or they can have a general tasting where they can just come to one of the tasting areas in our main winery or on our porch that looks out over the lavender and the flower fields. Or we also have a room especially for our wine club. Okay. And there they taste at no charge. And we have food and wine pairings that vary depending on what we're doing each season.
Yeah.
So you can have food and wine together.
Oh, okay. And it's different wines based on the season?
Exactly, based on the season and what's available.
Okay. And then you mentioned your wine club. Let's hit on that for just a second. You tell me a little bit about your wine club.
Well, the wine club, we have, it's really a nice thing. We have we ship wine 4 times a year.
Okay.
And they can select red wine or a mix of our wines. And many of these will be our new small production releases. So we make a lot of wine. We do a lot of experimentation. So we'll make a lot of small batch, maybe 600 cases. Or something like that, which goes mainly to the wine club.
Gotcha.
So we have that. Then we have a pickup party probably 4 times a year at the winery where we have food and music, and we close the winery except to the people who are members of the wine club. And then we have 2 or 3, like in a couple of weeks, we're going to spend 2 weeks going up the Mosel to the Rhine and then up the Rhine to Basel, Switzerland. And so a lot of our wine club members will be on that trip. So we do a lot of different things like that.
Yeah, that would be a really exciting trip to go down.
It will be.
Yeah. So when can they sign up for the wine club on your website, or do they need to come to the winery itself?
I think they can do either one. Either place.
Okay, and I'll direct them to check the website first, of course.
Please do. That'd be great.
And then when a listener comes in, what are your typical operating days and hours?
Well, we're open every day from about 10 until 6. And we open a little bit later on Sunday.
What about family or pets or things like that? If people like kids?
All the above.
Okay.
Anybody, they're all welcome. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they can bring anything. Now, what about, you mentioned you've got the food and the food pairings as definitely a key
Uh-huh.
factor in your winery here. Can people bring outside food in
Sure.
if they had something for their kids?
They
and
can
things
bring a
like that?
picnic. They can bring anything they want. Yes.
Perfect. Do you have any maximum group sizes for people if they wanted to come?
Well, if they want to be treated as a group, it would be good to contact us.
Okay, so
but
get a
we can-
reservation.
Yes, we can accommodate probably almost any size you can think of. So we have a very big property.
Okay. So if you come with a group, make sure that you contact beforehand, maybe get a reservation. That way you can get your best service.
That would be good. But I guess our winery's been described as the most beautiful in Texas, and it's pretty sparkling.
It is a beautiful property for sure. Well, and I think you also have another tasting room there on Main Street in Fredericksburg. So tell me about that.
It's a wonderful tasting room. It was the Buick dealership, and the building was built by the famous architect O'Neill Ford, or designed by O'Neill Ford from San Antonio, and we've had a tasting room there for about 6, 7, or 8 years, and a lot of people. So 2.5 million people go by, and so and only a small fraction actually turn into our winery. But this gives them another chance to taste our wine. It's a kind of a nice, pretty, open place to taste wine. We have some nice tables outside under cover that you can look out on Fredericksburg, and it's been a nice experiment.
And you get all that nice foot traffic there that goes up and down, shopping up and down Main Street in Fredericksburg.
That's the plan. And most of them, when they come and say, no, we've not been at the winery,
Okay.
and we'd like to taste the wine.
It's perfect lead
So
in.
you're asking about a place to taste wine. That's another one. Yes.
Another location.
A good
there.
one.
What are your busier and slower seasons? What's the best time for people to come visit?
Well, I think Saturdays are our busiest day throughout the year.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty, maybe January, February might be a little bit slower, but but not much.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a slowdown in the winter.
I think 2.5 million people now come to Fredericksburg, and primarily they list their reason for wine tourism.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of wine. When we started, we were winery number 3 in this region. Now there are at least 150 wineries.
Wow.
So it's nice.
Yeah, you're really grown. Let's talk for a second. If somebody can't come here for whatever reason, but they want to taste your wines, distribution. I know that you're pretty widely distributed throughout the state. So can you talk about some of your distribution options and ways for people to taste wine if they can't come here?
Well, to taste it, I guess you'd have to buy it.
Right.
And so it's in a lot of stores. It's in HEB is, I think, the #1 seller of wine in Texas, and we're very well represented there. Also in Kroger, and then a number of wine stores. We're in lots of restaurants and bars and things like that. But I think I'd go to one of the wine stores or grocery stores that has a big selection and just see what you think.
Yeah.
Try it.
It might be a great place, since it is widely available like that, for somebody who's excited to come here, but they can't get here yet, to at least be able to taste the wine before they come. So wet their palate a little bit.
That'd be good.
All right.
But we do have a lot of interesting wines that are only available here. The small production lots, and it's fun to see unusual varietals from the Rhone Valley, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So you've built this great winery over 30 years, and we've slowly bootstrapped it up into this amazing, beautiful property. What about future growth plans? Do you have any plans for future growth, or doing anything new or different, or adding?
I certainly don't think we need to get any bigger. I think this is a good size. But our focus has always been, how can we make our wine better and better and better? What can we do in terms of viticulture, in terms of winemaking? We keep all of our wines in barrel for 2 years at least, red and white.
Yeah.
And so and that's what I think produces the quality of our wine.
Yeah.
And we have we have a genius winemaker.
And you have that 2-year, do you have 2-year barrel aging on whites as well, you said?
Yes.
Wow, that's very different.
Yes, the Viognier,
Yeah.
the Chardonnay, the Sauvignon Blanc, the Semillon, the Marsanne, the Roussanne.
Yeah. And those neutral barrels, I presume?
Many of them are new.
Yeah. Okay. You even use new oak.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. And so your focus then is, how can we make our winemaking process even better every day? How do we constantly innovate and improve on that?
And that also means experimenting with, we will have 80 acres of grapes here, and we buy grapes from all over West Texas. And getting the right grapes planted and getting them harvested correctly, which our growers do wonderfully for us, by the way. And they, our wine's been served many times at the White House and the Governor's Mansion and the Beard House, and so it's been selected by a lot of people that know about wine. And that's the growers like that, as do we. They love to say, and their names are on the labels for whenever we can do it. And they love to say this wine, the president held this bottle of wine and poured it. That's a nice thing for us and for them.
Your reputation definitely precedes you, so that's
We
great.
hope.
You built a good reputation there. All right, well, as we get ready to wrap up then, there's a lot of different places that people could go visit here in Texas. And we were here now at Becker Vineyards. Tell me a little bit about why you think Becker really stands out and makes it unique that people would say, I really need to put that on my list to come visit.
Well, so the way I've tried to distinguish our winery is by making wine that wins major prizes in major wine competitions.
Right.
And there's no doubt that we were at the head of that list. So you can come and taste wines. Not that every winery says we make award-winning wine, but we really have the medals here. The saddles from Houston. We have the double gold medals from San Francisco Wine Competition, which is I think is the most prestigious. And the wine is here. You can taste it. And so that's I want the wine to speak for itself.
And those wines definitely speak for themselves. You'll see when you get ready to taste them. I think the countless awards that they've won kind of speak to that already, but you can find out for yourself. And the incredible tasting room they have there, the vineyard, the attentive staff that's going to take care of you when you go to visit, all of that is a testament to the incredible, wonderful experience that you'll have when you go to visit Becker Vineyards and drink some of these great wines there as well. And like we talked in the interview, and as we always know, go check out their website first. It's www.beckervineyards.com. There you're going to be able to do things like shop for those great wines. You can purchase them directly from their website, but they also have some other merchandise and other things you can shop for there. You'll see more about their story, their history, learn about some of the events that they have coming up, what to expect when you go to visit for your tasting, as well as they also do some really cool virtual tasting events that you can find out about on their website, where you can order the wine in advance and they do kind of a Zoom tasting where you can learn about the wines as you get to taste them at home. Some really neat, fun stuff that they do there at Becker. So check out that website again before you go to visit. And don't forget, when you go see them, make sure you tell them you heard about them on this podcast, Texas Under Vine. Okay, after the interview concluded, I was able to actually go sit down, as I talked about earlier, at that chef's table there with Dr. Becker. We were joined by his fiancée at the time. They are now married. Congratulations, Dr. Becker and Ms. Becker, Margaret. And they were able to sit down with us with a bunch of wine club members around and taste these great foods, hear about the great wines. It was really a great event. I encourage everybody to check that out and go do that if you get a chance. Really neat and fun event to taste the wines and to taste some great food and experience the thing that he's most passionate about, which is that food and wine pairing that's been the heart of everything they've done at Becker Vineyards since they started. Now, while I was there was one wine we tasted that it just sat perfectly on my palate. I knew immediately when I tasted this wine, that's the one for me. That's the one that I had to get for my wine library for this episode. And it was a 2021 Mourvèdre. So this is a really great wine. It's got deep, silky, soft, smooth flavors, deep kind of earthy notes to it, but bright fruit, dark fruit on top of that. It just was the perfect complement to the foods that we ate there, and it was perfect by itself as well if you just want to sip on it. So that to me really encompassed everything that I did there while I was at Becker. It was a perfect reminder of that awesome food and meal that I had. So that was the bottle that I purchased for my wine library. You got to get yourself a bottle. Make sure you try this whenever you go. It's their 2021 Mourvèdre. And with that, my time is coming to a close. It's time for me to mosey on down the road to check out some other great wine destinations to bring that information to you. But before I go, I'm going to ask one favor from you. Would you be willing to leave me a rating and review for this podcast wherever you get the show? It really means a lot to me. It's free. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it does help the show get seen by even more people. So it moves that up in the algorithm so other Texas wine lovers or people who may not love Texas wine yet, but they are going to when they get a chance to try it, get to see it, find out about these great places. It elevates the whole wine industry. And so it just takes a second. So if you would do that for me, I would be grateful to you. Again, just a simple rating and review wherever you get the podcast. And if you're actually watching this video on YouTube, make sure you go down and like, follow, and subscribe. And so if you've been to Becker Vineyards, leave me a comment telling me what's your favorite thing about Becker Vineyards. Or if you haven't been yet, but you're excited to go now because of this episode, leave me a comment about what you're most looking forward to about your visit to Becker Vineyards. And with that, my time is up. So don't forget, subscribe to my socials to be notified anytime a new episode is released. And until then, happy trails and bottoms up, y'all. Thanks for listening to Texas Under Vine. We strive to provide you with the best information about wine businesses all over Texas. Be sure to check out our website at texasundervine.com and follow us on our socials at Texas Under Vine to stay up on all the upcoming episodes. Please email us with any suggestions or feedback. Also, contact us if you're interested in donating, sponsoring, or advertising on the podcast, just to help us cover our expenses and bring even more great info to you in future episodes. Above all, travel safely, and most especially, drink responsibly. Howdy, Vine Trippers. Before we go, I wanted to direct you to my website, www.texasundervine, because there you're going to find a whole host of things. Besides access to the audio versions and the video versions of the podcast, you can also get those on any podcast provider and then the video on YouTube. But there you're going to find a couple of things. Did you know that I actually sold some Texas Under Vine merchandise? I only have a handful of items available, about 5 different things, but they are up on my store. So if you go to the website, texasundervine.com, and go to the top, you're going to see a link for the merchandise store. And there you can get your own Texas Under Vine swag to proudly show all of your friends that you support the Texas wine industry, and you can get them started on and hooked on the podcast as well, so they can go visit even more of these great wine destinations. But in addition to the store, I also have a Patreon for my subscribers, people that support this show. I do this all out of a work of love from my heart. I do not make any money on this podcast. I'm actually in the red because I support it all out of my own pocket as a teacher. And it's mainly because I love wine and I love the Texas wine industry. So if you're willing to help me do that and you'd like to see more of these great episodes, hear more from these amazing winemakers, learn more about some fun destinations for you to go and visit on your own, I would appreciate if you would be willing to subscribe to my Patreon. So at the top of my website page, again, you'll find a Become a Patron link. And there you can get all the information about becoming a subscriber to the podcast here as a Patreon subscriber. It only costs a few dollars a month if you're willing to commit that. And there are various levels that you can commit to that each give you behind the scenes benefits that you don't get. And I do have some new things in the pipeline coming down soon. So you want to get on that sooner than later. But right now you can get things like behind the scenes photos at different wineries. You can get things like at one level, you'll get a video walkthrough of the winery. So for every episode, I will post a video walkthrough of me taking you through the winery itself so you can see what it's like before you go. And then at one level, you can even find out before everyone else where I'm headed the next week on the show as it comes out. So you'll know before everyone else. You get a sneak peek. So there's just different levels of benefits and they all cost a different amount. And as you subscribe, you become the heart of this podcast. You really are what helps me succeed. You are my community and my people. And thank you so much for those that do subscribe. So if you're interested in joining Patreon, check the Become a Patron link at the top of the website. So again, the website is www.texasundervine.com. You can also go to all of my socials. I'm at Texas Under Vine on almost all the social accounts. And check it out and consider sponsoring the podcast and maybe even buying some of that really cool swag on the merchandise store. Happy trails and bottoms up, fine trippers.